here from India. You know, it was they were kind of proselytizing in a sense, you know, and there were several of them, and you know, they were attracted to Southern California because Southern California even then was kind of a, you know, mecca for the New Age people. You know, there's a lot of health nuts coming out here, and you know, people with spiritual feelings and stuff like that. So, so one of the swamis came out here, and he thought he liked the place and everything, and so he started this ashrama. He bought the Fusino Ranch. It was another French guy. Had a ranch just over here, you know, just over the top of the hill. And so he bought his ranch and he started building. And, you know, he was pretty well funded. He had some good backing. You know, he had some political characters and he had some Hollywood types that were interested in his thing. And he started like an ashram thing, but it was like all women. You know, it was all females because he felt that women were like the mothers of the earth, and he felt that they were better nurturers and protectors of the earth, and better nurturers of the spirit. So he created this whole religion. It was an eclectic religion. It incorporated all the values of you know, Native American. It had Islam. They had Buddhism, they had Hinduism, they had Christianity, and when they built the temple there, it's reflected in there's little niches. Oh, cool! There's little niches in the wall of the temple there, and each of the niches is dedicated to a different world religion. Anyway, bottom line is, you know, he went through all this stuff there. They had a big fire. At the same time this was burning down, their place was on fire, but they saved the temple with prayer. It's the coolest story, man. Yeah, so, you know, I mean, basically the firemen told, hey, this place is toast, man. You guys got to get out. And all the nuns, they all said, no, we're staying in here and we're going to pray. And they prayed, and the fire went right around the place. I mean, they said there's like these wooden steps leading up to it, and the fire burned the first step and then just stopped. You know, the fire burned up to the bushes around the temple and stopped, you know. So they like, you know, and the firemen were going, wow, you know, this is like an act of God, you know. So the Swami gets old, and, you know, he's gonna die, and he decides to leave the whole thing to the women. And, you know, the Indian overlords or whatever of this religion back in India, they freaked out, you know, because they're basically a bunch of macho dudes, you know. So they cut it off from the religious organization in India, and so they had to kind of create their own thing. It's now run by women. It's still the same values that the Swami set up at the beginning. And interestingly enough, the lady that we want to interview is, she goes by the name of Sudama. And she actually, her real, you know, English or Anglo name is Dr. Susan Schrader. She was like the principal or the vice principal down at Clark Junior High School in the 60s. And she had always had a spiritual leaning, talking about Sudama over here.
Oh, yeah.
And she had always had spiritual leanings. She'd been involved with the Episcopal Church in higher levels and stuff like that. But then she went into education, right? And so she's at Clark Junior High, and she keeps hearing from her students, there's a place up the street that's just crazy, man. It's like, you know, a cult, or it's like, you know, and they told her, oh no, it's a nudist colony. No, it's a, you know, no, it's
wild
gypsies,
rumors.
you know. So she went up and checked it out, and she said as soon as she set foot in there, she knew this was where she was going to be. And she quit her job, she moved up there, and she just slowly worked herself into, eventually became the head of the organization. It's really cool. And she's the one that we want to interview and, you know, get her story, because
Right.
that is a great story. You know?
Yeah, it's just what we've been talking about for a long time now is to get oral histories of some of the older folks, and
Right.
the people that do have such a unique take on the valley, like we were talking about before, Dan, about some of these people that, you know, you wouldn't know. They're just they're just going about their lives.
Right.
They're being unassuming, which is one of the great charms of La Crescenta, is just this unassuming
Oh,
quality.
yeah,
you know.
right, right.
Nobody's trying to be more than what they are.
Sure.
And so it's just a very in that sense, laid back.
Yeah, yeah.
Cut. That was amazing, guys. Amazing.
Good.
Just give me 1 second, buddy. And
Certainly.
focus to focus.
Okay.
Go ahead, talk to me.
This is the only white grape we have in the vineyard here. All the rest are red grapes. Most of them, they were all planted by the city of Glendale when they remodeled this park in 2004 and 2005. So they planted this vineyard here as a commemorative vineyard to the original owners of this land, the Deukmejian family. They're French immigrant winemakers. They bought this in 1885, and they also bought the water rights in Dunsmore Canyon and in Cook's Canyon on the one that went around.
Hold that thought. I apologize. I'm going to make an adjustment here.
Ah,
All right,
Wow.
you guys.
Yeah.
We're actually going to start now.
Okay.
Okay.
Be patient. So, Mike, if you wouldn't mind just walking into this.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just gonna pan off the winery and kind of get.
Sure, man.
My movement's gonna be off the winery onto you walking up and talking. Hey, Stuart. And set.
okay.
Hey, Stuart.
Hey, Mike. Here we are.
Yeah.
As you know, these are the only white grapes that we've got in the vineyard. But this is part of the expansion that we did. But the original part of this vineyard was put in by the city of Glendale when they remodeled the park, all that you see here today, in 2004, 2005. So they selected the grapes that planted, and then they asked us at the Historical Society if we would hold programs on wine history, and we can tend the vineyard,
Yeah.
and if we wanted, we could make wine from the grapes. And we said,
Yeah.
okay.
That sounds like it
Sounds
worked out
like it
great. How
did.
did they choose the different varieties here?
You know, I do not know that.
Okay.
That is something that we came in after they had made those decisions.
Yeah.
But they did it, I think, because of whatever it was, I don't know. But they did select one grape called Alicante Bouschet, which is a wine grape. It is used mostly by commercial vineyard and owners and winemakers as a colorant, or as the French say, a teinturier, which is the same thing for colorant, right?
Yeah.
But because it comes out when you harvest it and you crush it, it comes out deep, dark, ruby red from the get-go.
yeah.
And a lot of other red grapes are kind of pink, and it needs aging to get them really dark. But with this, you're dark from the get-go. They also planted a red flame, which is a table grape. You can make wine out of it if you like really flat tasting wine. And then there's another one at the top that Californians call early Burgundy. Commercial winemakers call it early Burgundy, but it's neither. But it's an old French grape called Abouriou, which is grown in the area adjacent to Bordeaux, the Bordeaux region in France. But we make it primarily the wine from the Alicante Bouschet grapes here, which are the 1, 2, 3, the 4th and 5th rows. It's a huge producer. We can, out of 22 vines that we have here of Alicante, we can make anywhere between 40 to 50 to 200 bottles of wine a year, depending upon the nature of the year, what the rain is, the weather, the climate, and whether all of our little four-footed friends get a hold of the stuff
There's a
before
bird
we do.
eyeing us right
That's
now,
right,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. You know, I've helped with the harvest on the Alicante Bouschet, and it literally turns your hands purple.
Right,
I mean,
right.
dark purple.
You know,
It's like blood, you know?
You know, and it stays for days
Yeah,
afterwards,
it does.
right?
It does. It's a lot of fun. But you know what? It's the front rows that have the good story.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because we were able to expand the vineyard, because this area that we're standing on was just very poorly planted, and it was kind of an afterthought. And the city allowed us to expand the vineyard to the size now, so we added on 3 more rows. They were both done by Boy Scout projects for their Eagle Scout merit badge, or congratulations. I mean, their finality in that. And one of the main reasons for doing it,
Eagle Project, their Eagle Project.
the Eagle Project, yeah. One of the main reasons for doing this is because after the station fire of 2009, one of our members was hiking up in the way at the top of Dunsmore Canyon. And because the fire had burned off everything, all of a sudden he could see there was these 3 dormant grapevines were sprouting out of the ash of the fire. So he said, hey, Stuart, man, we got to go up there and look at this. So we did. We got all these cuttings from that. I stuck them in my backyard in pots, sent off to UC Davis at their Vineyard collection, what would you call it, their DNA selection bank that they've got up there. And they identified them as a 19th century grape called Burger, or the French name is Mondabon. But it was planted in the area that we know the La Ménagers had a pile of grapes growing in that spot. So it's not some errant bird came by and did a little dropping that started. It was from the 19th century. Burger grape makes a white wine, and it's like the Chardonnay of the 19th century.
That is just amazing.
So that was one of the motivation factors for expanding the vineyard, plus this area wasn't being used. So another one of our members had pointed out to me the remnant of an old vineyard close to Foothill Boulevard in La Crescenta.
In a liquor store parking lot.
In a liquor
right?
store parking lot. So I did a midnight salvage supply, took some cuttings, and so the Zinfandel that we got from that will be here in the vineyard as well. So these little vines that you see here with the smaller leaves, these are nothing but rootstock that we were able to purchase. We are going to graft some of the cuttings from the Burger, the Zinfandel, onto this rootstock, because vines they're essentially weeds that can grow anywhere, but they, like any plant, they have their enemies, their biological enemies, one of which is called downy mildew, which we all have here in the vineyard, but we have certain chemicals, natural chemicals that we can knock that down with. But the other one is called phylloxera, which is a little tiny pin-headed beetle infestation that attacks the roots and kills off the vine. It doesn't happen much around here because we have a really sandy soil. Sandy soils are inhospitable to that phylloxera louse that comes along. But most vineyards now, they will graft on their good grapes onto a rootstock that is impervious to the phylloxera. This is especially important in Europe, where in the 19th century, virtually the entire grape stocks of Europe, from France, Italy, Spain, Germany, were almost wiped out. The French at one point thought that this was going to be the end of the wine business in France. It was that close. So, and they discovered that if you take the vinifera from Europe and graft it onto American style rootstocks, which were the ones that actually brought the disease, when these collectors in the 19th century would take them from the US or the North American continent to Europe, where they could collect and put them in their greenhouse and show these things off. Well, they didn't know of course, that they were bringing this disease along with it. They did not know that. Yeah. So it's the phylloxera and the downy mildew came along with this. But the American rootstock, not all of them, but many of them were impervious to the disease. They were just a host. Gotcha. But it did not kill them. But they discovered through various different French scientists, British scientists, American scientists, that if you graft the natural vinifera of Europe onto American rootstock that is impervious, then you don't get the phylloxera problem.
Wow, so the American wine industry saved the French wine industry.
That's right, that they almost at the same time destroyed. So
Wow.
it's a double-edged sword on it, you know?
Hey, tell me about this soil, man. This soil looks terrible.
It
You
is.
know, it's rocky and sandy. It doesn't look like you can grow anything in here.
But
except weeds.
this is what we're standing on, is essentially a stream bed. It's all this debris, the the stuff that coming out of the canyon has been deposited here and built up, so it is rocks and sand. But interestingly enough, grapes love bad soil. They do excellent in bad soil. In fact, there's a bit of masochism to grapevines. The more you beat them, the better they respond.
Wow.
So you can cut them back. You can use this horrible soil that no other plants will grow except for weeds. But if you stick them actually counterintuitively, if you stick them in that beautiful natural loamy soil that so many other vegetables just flourish in, they get more diseases from that.
Okay. Okay.
So this kind of a soil is perfect. There's an area in the Bordeaux region. It's called what to us Americans or English speakers, it looks like graves, but I don't know how the French pronounce it. But it just merely means in French gravel.
Oh.
And that's one of the major areas. And it's, of course, right along the riverbank there of the Gironde River that goes through Bordeaux. And that's one of the great wine-producing spots in that whole Bordeaux region.
So we have a historic vineyard. We're here in LA, and a lot of people don't realize that LA was the birthplace of the California wine industry.
It's exactly
and you
right.
wrote a book about that.
That's right. I was just so flabbergasted when I read some of these source material that when there was only one vineyard in the Napa Valley, and we all know that the Napa Valley today is one of the great spots for winemaking and for innovative winemaking in the world. At the time when this became a state, there was only one vineyard in the Napa Valley. There was over 100 in the LA region, 85 in the old Pueblo precincts alone. It was just amazing. And they'd been there since, when the mission started. Of course, the mission started the whole wine business because they did it for religious reasons, so they could have wine at the Mass. That's very important. But we can figure out that there's several different people that were living in Los Angeles in the 1790s that could have been the first private winemaking people, one of which was the ranchero Jose Maria Verdugo.
Wow.
In his San Rafael rancho in what is now Glendale.
So the beginning of the California wine industry was in Glendale.
It was in Glendale.
I love it. Wow.
So that's
But then the French got involved.
that's right.
And they really brought it to the next level.
That's right. Leave it to the French and wine to bring it to the next level. Exactly. Now there was many people moving to Los Angeles in the Spanish and the Mexican period. In 1831, Jean-Louis Vignier, a Frenchman from Bordeaux region, had made this around the Cape Horn voyage, and he ended up in Hawaii, and he was actually making a rum distillery up there. But the king of Hawaii, at his ear was the Puritan minister from New England who was telling him that rum is the devil's drink.
Wow.
And so the king said, no more rum distilleries. So Vignier said, okay, I guess I'm out of here. And he finally settled in Los Angeles in 1831. And he bought an old vineyard that was close to the river, and he started expanding. He sent for cuttings from his family in Bordeaux. He started planting Bordeaux-style grapevines.
In downtown Los Angeles?
Downtown Los Angeles.
Wow.
If you see the tower of the MTA down there, right behind Union Station, and even closer to the freeway, that's where his winery was, right
down
there.
near the LA River.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow, that's neat.
And it's also interesting and ironic to see, he went to the town council when he was there, and we know that the river has been channeled with concrete because of the flooding problem. Well, he also asked the town council, could you please straighten the river in front of where it runs past my vineyard, please? It's making problems for me.
All right,
So,
only the French would have that kind of...
So LA's always had trouble with its river being, capricious in that sense.
Yeah.
But,
so the French were attracted to LA because of the wine industry that was becoming, a thing here, right? And so Mr. Le Mesurier
Mr. Le Mesurier came. He came when he was about 18,
Yeah.
in about 1868.
Oh.
He was naturalized according to his son, who put it down in the son when they had a passport made up to go to Europe in the 1920s. He gave a whole slew of information about his father, Georges Leménager.
Okay.
And he said he came here in 1868 when he was 18, and then when the Franco-Prussian War started in 1870, being the great French patriot that he was, he loved his homeland. He went back to fight in the war against the Prussians. And then when that was over, he did like it here because of the great climate. Plus, this is a natural, California is a natural winemaking place, one of the few in the world where you could, if you come here, you know anything about winemaking, you can see that the soil is right, the climate is right, and this is the place to come. So he came back. He was a naturalized citizen in 1872, and he had been working for other French winemakers. The Vacher brothers were one of them. And he in essence took over their section when the Vacher brothers moved out to Riverside. And he started his own winery, and he needed grapes. He was doing pretty good, so he needed more grapes. He found this place, he bought it in 1885, and hundreds of acres. He had also more acres down in the Verdugo woodlands, sort of near the mouth of the canyon, sort of where Glendale City College is now.
Yeah, where that
community college.
Yeah, you can kind of see the
Yeah.
building.
And so by the 1920s, the family had over 1,300 acres of
Wow.
property up here, most of it in vines.
Wow. And so they were making wine here.
They were making
Wow.
wine so they could supply their winery, which was down on North Main Street,
Yeah.
where most of the other wineries were
Okay.
in Los Angeles at the time.
Well, what's the story on the barn then? Was it a winery?
Yes and no. Mostly it was sort of a storage area. They started this probably, we think, we don't know an exact start date, about 1910. And this was Georges Leménager's son, Louis Leménager, who actually was running things because George got in trouble with the federal revenue officers for not paying certain wine stamps and
Yeah.
taxes that he needed to do. So he gave it to his son, who came up here and was living up here. This park is 700 acres. That's what the city got from the Leménagers. Well, most of the arable land, most of that is what you see here in what is the park, what was this flat area where the debris basin is now. And as you hike up the canyons, you see all the level spots, even though they're really heavily sloped. You see the level spots next to the creek, to Dunsmore Creek, and that was all planted with vines. In fact, Louis Jr., Louis Leménager's son, Louis said, "Oh, Dad always planted the best grapes up in the canyon."
And that's where you got this vine from.
That's where we got this
Yeah.
vine,
Wow.
this one.
The best.
Yeah.
The best.
So,
You know, I've seen a picture of Louis Leménager in a World War I outfit. What's the story there?
Louis Leménager in
I
a
mean,
war?
George Leménager.
George.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, and we both know that he was a French patriot.
Yeah.
He was through and through a French patriot, even though he lived here. But he started a French newspaper, French
Yeah.
language newspaper, when they had the 100th anniversary of the Bastille Day in 1892, 1889. That's what it was. He made this fiery speech, but he was such a patriot that when World War I broke out, he went back to France to fight in the French army.
Wow.
He pestered them so much because at first they said, "You're 64 years old. Get out of here, old man. You're not going to be in this army. We need some young guys."
Yeah.
He pestered them so much that they said, "All right. We'll put you in as a private. Just leave us alone, you know." So they did, and he stayed for all 4 years.
Right.
And he rose up in the ranks. He had several medals for valor because he was wounded several times. But because his ability as a linguist, he ended up being seconded to General Pershing's staff, the American general, and he was sort of a liaison officer between the French army and the American army. And he came home in 1918, went back another time, came back again when he realized that his health was failing, and he was going to probably die. He decided he wanted to die at home.
Wow.
So he went back to France, where he did indeed die in 1923.
Wow. Well, it's funny as we get into Prohibition. So what happens to a winemaking operation in Prohibition?
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. Oh my God, guys.
Because that was an interesting segue into another business. So we get into the 20s, and all of a sudden now we got Prohibition. How do these guys survive? They're making
That's
wine.
right. That's right. They're making wine. They actually, it's interesting to see that for the dichotomy in American viticulture, if you want to call that, in American viticulture life and styles, because while the wineries all shut down or went broke or stopped or were sold off for whatever reason, the vineyard owners prospered.
What?
You think,
That's
what's going
crazy.
on here? The vineyard owners, well, they started just selling their grapes as table grapes, as produce.
Okay.
You know, there was, if the grapes are grapes until you ferment them, so they're not subject to laws. But also, one of the codicils in the Prohibition law was that any head of household could make 200 gallons of grape juices for their own use.
So they were still selling plenty of grapes, right?
That's right.
All right.
So vineyard owners prospered because of that codicil, because all of a sudden there was a gigantic rise in home winemaking going on, primarily in the Italian, the Spanish, and the French emigre towns. There's the stories of the policemen in like Philadelphia and New York, where they had these huge areas of Italian immigrants. They said they always knew when the grape trains came into town, because all of the Italian neighborhoods started smelling like wineries.
All right.
So these guys were making wine still. And in fact, in many cases, you can make a case that it's because of the Italian home winemakers in the Prohibition days that kept alive the ideas of winemaking and good winemaking. And one of the major grapes that they loved to have, that was a big seller in the Prohibition time, was the one that we have here that we make our wine from, the Alicante Bouschet, because it is a huge producer. So one vine can make several gallons of wine out of it. It's amazing. So, So all of a sudden, all these vineyard owners were pulling out their really good grapes that don't ship very well. Because one of the other positive values of Alicante, it's got a tough skin on the grape, so it ships well. It doesn't break up. But whereas Merlot and Cabernet is a little bit more delicate, and so it doesn't ship well. And it can withstand all of this. So not only does it produce huge amounts of grapes, which you can make lots of wine from, which these folks love because there wasn't that much going on, and you could ship it. So California vineyard owners could ship all this stuff all back east and make a lot of money. There's an apocryphal story that said a lot of the vineyard owners would put a little label on top of the box of grapes, and it says, "Warning, do not add yeast or fermentation will occur."
And here's how not to do it.
Yeah, this is how you don't do that.
All right.
You don't add this yeast at this time, and so forth. But yeah, it was pretty funny. But as several authors and other filmmakers have said, Prohibition made hypocrites of the American public, because they weren't going to stop drinking. And ironically, there was a woman's group. That's what it was called, the woman's group. They were the ones that started pushing for the end to Prohibition, because they saw that the hypocrisy, they saw the lawlessness that happened, and so all the states started voting to repeal it, and the repeal occurred in December of 1933.
Which brings us to an interesting incident. We talked about this barn being a storage place and a place for their equipment and stuff like that. But there really was one incident where it was a winery.
Right.
But it came to a bad end.
That's right.
Tell that story.
Is that a sort of a commentary on on the end of Prohibition.
It was the end of this
That's
winery,
a winery. But they were making, all of this was all grapes up here, all the way down to Markridge Road, because that was the end, that was the line of the rancho. The rancho line was Markridge Road, hence the name from that. So everything above it was public land, which originally, it had all the water rights. So that's why the Lemenagers bought this, because they had this great water rights in the Dunsmore Canyon and Cook's Canyon, on the next one over. But
so there was the group of World War I veterans.
The Lemenagers, I think their interest in winemaking was petering out by the end of the 30s.
Oh.
But Louis Lemenager, he rented the barn and all the equipment and all the huge primary fermentation vats that were in the barn, all redwood vats. They were made out. That's one of the key things of California winemaking. They make these primary fermentation vats out of redwood. But he had rented those to a consortium of World War I veterans who were going to make wine, and they were going to bottle the harvest in September, right after that, and they were going to be ready on the end of Prohibition in December 5th, 1933.
Yeah.
Well, in November, I think it was the 19th, a giant fire swept the whole mountains here. The whole face of the mountains from La Cañada all the way out to Sunland was all burnt over. And one of the things that happened was the barn here burned, all the wood portions of the barn like this, the roof and all the redwood vats holding all the wine, and it all poured out through this doorway, and we have pictures of this burned out, a few days after the fire, this burned out stone barn with this great big swirling red stained earth where 20,000 gallons of wine and 5,000 gallons of brandy
poured out like a
poured
river.
out a river. It came right out of that.
And how ironic now that
Yes.
you're growing grapes on this very land that was watered by isn't that
interesting?
misbegotten wine, you know?
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So they rebuilt the barn.
Right.
Yeah, but they built it differently.
That's right, because the stone parts with all of the windows in it, that still remains, but the original building had a gable-ended roof. Gables is a triangular shape that you see on most houses. They extended well out over the walls of the stone, and they had knee braces, which are these wood-made brackets that holds the roof structure up. And each side of the plane of the roof, each plane had 3 dormer windows into the attic that you can see when most houses have windows on the roof plane. They're called dormer windows. So that was the original look to it, but for some reason they decided to rebuild the roof differently. So we have this curving roof called a barrel vault roof. And they made these sight trusses. Trusses are the big support structures that are inside. We really can't see them here today, but they built them on site to hold the whole roof structure up. Wow. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them in the that you can only see when you get inside. But they were site built. In other words, they put up some scaffolding, they put all the lumber up, and they built them right up there on top of the stone walls, and then they hoisted them into place.
Wow.
So it's a little different.
Yeah. And then, of course, the family moved into the barn.
Right, after it was finished, and I think it was either 35 or 36 when they had it rebuilt. And they did a little bit differently. Instead of having a complete floor on the second floor, they made it into a mezzanine style floor. So it was open in the center, they had staircase that goes up. So they had the exterior stairs, they had the 2 fireplaces that are in there, and they began living there.
And they lived there pretty much until the 60s, and they made, the grape thing wasn't going on anymore for them, but they made money off of selling water.
That's water rights.
Yeah.
Because they have these 2 great resources in Dunsmore Canyon and Cook's Canyon.
Yeah, because they had this valley down below and it was just exploding with houses.
That's right.
And they all needed water. There weren't municipal sources of water back then. You had to get your water from the canyons.
Right.
And so all of the canyons were owned by these little water companies.
I think wasn't there probably between, Devil's Gate Dam in Pasadena and all the way out to Tujunga, there was like 5 or 6 or 7 different water companies.
Right.
And one of the reasons why the 1952 annexation of this swath of land by Glendale is Glendale, one of the water companies was run by this gentleman who decided to embezzle the money and made it off to Mexico.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
the city was able to persuade everybody up here that it's a good thing if we annex the spot, because then you'll have your water on a consistent basis.
Yeah, municipal water.
Municipal
right,
water.
Right.
You'll still be getting it from the same spot, but it's municipal water.
Yeah, yeah.
Hold that thought. That was great.
Right.
Rolling.
Okay, hey
All right.
Mike, let's go up to the Alicante Boucher grapes and I'll show you what this little
Okay.
machine is for, testing.
What are you testing for?
All right, what I'm testing for is the sugar content in the grapes. And the sugar content as it rises as the grapes mature, at a certain point is the time that we need to pick the grapes. And the sugar content we usually refer to as Brix, B-R-I-X. Now I think it's a Latin name, but I don't know its derivation. But Brix shows the sugar content, and it will also determine when the grapes are fermented and the yeast is added, it will turn into alcohol. So Brix content is equally exactly what a potential alcohol content will be.
Very good.
But we know from practice, from centuries and time immemorial, that the grapes need to be picked at a certain sugar content.
Okay.
Even before knowing about this little thing called a refractometer, even before this, grape vineyard owners could just tell by tasting when it was time to pick the grapes. Got the sugar content, the taste of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a whole bunch of the little grapes, put them in here, squish them up, and then I'm going to mush some of the liquid on this lens here, and then I can look through the eyepiece and I can see 2 scales in it. On one side is the Brix and the scale, and on the other side is the potential alcohol.
Okay.
So if I look in here, if I'm thinking that the best target for the Brix content is between 20 and 25 on the scale. And if you do 20 to 25, that's going to be 12 to 14% alcohol content.
Okay.
And that's what most really good wines stay within, that particular kind of alcohol content. There are some others like sherries or port wine that goes up. You know, it can be like a 19% alcohol rate, but it's a very heavier wine. But a dry red wine, you want to stay between
Like we have here.
like we're going to have here, between 20 and 25, which will be like 12 to 14%
right.
alcohol content.
Well, let's pick some before it gets dark.
So we'll do this until the grapes get to its particular point. Now let's see.
There's some right there.
Right. We've
Wanna
got
get in here?
We've got so many.
Okay. Okay.
See? Now look at these. These things are huge.
Wow.
Look at these clusters here. I mean,
They're gorgeous.
only do we have a few clusters that still have the green grapes on them. All grapes are
You know what would
green.
be a good shot is back over here through this hole.
Hold that.
Yeah.
Turn around. You can just talk to Mike
Okay.
for 1 second, and I'll turn around.
All grapes are green until they go through a change. It is called Verizon. It's a French word. It has nothing to do with the phone company, but it's called Verizon. It's spelled differently too. But so the white grapes stay green. They just get more golden color.
Okay.
But the red grapes turn red or burgundy colored or purple like these are. So what I do is I go along, take a bunch of just random pull on some of the grapes themselves, the little stuff, and I'm going to throw them into the bunch here.
Mike, what are you eating right now? Oh, he's on snack break.
There we go.
Craft
Here we go.
services.
That's right. See, now here's a bunch. You can see it's still got 1 or 2 little white grapes left on it, so it hasn't gone completely through the change.
Okay.
And
He tastes still a little bit sour.
A little bit? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, try this one. This is fatter and juicier
Okay.
looking. See what that tastes like.
Oh yeah, that's there.
Okay.
That's beautiful.
So I gotta
Wow,
be,
nice and
if I'm gonna
sweet.
be,
Hold that 1 second. Mike, can you say that one more time? Just
Oh
again?
man, that was good. All right, I'll just eat another one.
yeah, try that out. Look at that. Look at that.
Oh man, that's
So-
great. Nice and sweet.
So now, knowing that and knowing how it tastes, I could slant my testing here
Yeah.
by just picking the fattest, juiciest looking one because I would know that they were up.
Okay, I
to
gotcha.
that's a- But I
Yeah.
don't want to do that. I want to get an overall average of what the actual sugar content is.
Okay.
So that when we do harvest, because we're going to pick all of the bunches,
Man,
so
that's gonna be a
therefore
lot.
it is going to be average out. So we got to make sure that we are averaging to the bricks content that we want before we pick. Now I also do not put in the stems like this, unlike marijuana growers who put in stems and seeds.
How do you know that?
Yes, Stuart, how do you know about that? And I say to people who ask me, I'm a child of my times. So you go through and you try to get a little bit of a averaging of all the different grapes. You know, some of them are smaller than others, but you want an average because that's how you find it.
Boy,
But now
Forget
have you?
the wine, man? Let's just eat them.
That's right. Now haven't you been noticing every single one of the vines here is loaded with these clusters?
Yeah.
That's why this Alicante was
This is
so.
huge. You know?
They
There's
were
gonna be
so.
like hundreds of pounds of this stuff.
I know. And look at the other one. Then run the row right next here is
Yeah.
the red flame. Now, this is particularly prone to get the downy mildew disease, which this one has. You can see the great clusters right there.
yeah.
They're gray with the mildew on it, so they just haven't come forth at all.
Yeah, so
But-
this is real farming, man. This is not like
It
an
is.
exact science.
It
you
is.
get failures and you get abundance.
Exactly, and that's another reason why the Alicante was so popular among vineyard owners, because it was not immune, but it was able to roll with some of the diseases, the downy mildew that I was talking about. So it was a good selection. But there has also grown up a little bit of snobbishness about Alicante because it was so popular in Prohibition times for home winemakers because you could make it. But a lot of commercial winemakers have turned up their nose at it, saying, well, you know, we use it for coloring, but as a standalone wine, it's not not that good.
Right.
You know, which is rather snobbish. I just came back from Portugal, and there's an area in the south of Portugal where the main grape variety that they use is Alicante Bouschet, and it is the most expensive wine on the menus of restaurants.
Oh, so the Portuguese get it.
Yeah, the Portuguese get it. Of course, now the snobs may say, well, what can you say? They're Portuguese.
Right. Wow.
So what I do is I keep going down the line here and picking a few grapes off at a time. And I don't want the unturned grapes that are still white or green. Don't want those because they're definitely tart and they would
Look at how
skew
this
this.
is like blood here, man.
I know. And this is like what you were saying earlier, Mike.
Yeah.
When we harvest, our hands in our forearms are just,
you wanna catch this?
ruby red with these.
Wow. It is so red. And now my hand is just stained with this stuff. Wow.
Isn't it the fact that we had prohibition, we were attempting social engineering. We should all be wary of projects to social engineer because it was a total failure. People, in fact, went even the opposite direction. I'm gonna drink now, damn it. The government can't tell me what to do. And it was foolish.
True, true. Yeah, in some cities, I remember Ken Burns' documentary talks about some cities, level of consumption actually went up
That's
after Prohibition. Now,
And-
how
and-
much of this do you need? Are we good here?
Yeah, we're good. We have a good solid bunch of this. Let's go back outside and we
Okay.
can, to the end of the row at least, and we can mush it up, and then I'll put the juice onto the lens of the refractometer, and we have just enough light, maybe you can get a reading off of it.
Hey, so to mush it up, man, do you want me to take my shoes off so I can squish it
Sure.
with my feet? How am I going to fit it in that little cup, though?
That's right. You know, a little bit of toe jam will help the consistency of the wine, right?
All right.
So I did wash my hands, so now I just crush the grapes up. Oops, probably shouldn't have worn this color of,
Oh,
I
hey.
should have worn a color like yours.
Oh, red badge of courage.
That's right, man. But see, now we're getting a good juice out of that.
Wow.
There's a few seeds that are coming out.
Wow,
on
I'll
that.
drink that when you're done.
Yeah, okay. Okay, if you will hold this up and pull the lens cover back,
Okay.
because I tuned it up before I came up here. So we put this on. Let's get it kind of as level as possible. Okay, now close the lid. Nothing on top of it. Perfect.
Wow, look at that.
Okay, now take this, look into the setting sun. Ooh, okay. Ooh, okay. 15.
What's that mean?
That's the bricks count, 15. So, and remember what I was saying is that we need it between 20 and 25.
So it's
is
got a ways to go.
So we got a little ways to go. You know, in all the years that we have harvested these grapes, the highest I was ever able to get the bricks on this Alicante was 19 and a half.
Oh.
And it just bugged me so much that we
Yeah.
couldn't get it above that.
Yeah.
You know, we let it hang longer on
Uh-huh.
the vine.
It just wouldn't rise.
It
huh?
wouldn't. It would do it. And one time I talked to my winemaking friend, vineyard owner, Don Galliano of Galliano Vineyards out in the
Wow.
in the
Heavy hitter.
yeah. I mean, he was very
Yeah.
helpful to me when writing the book. I said, Don, am I doing something wrong, man? I just can't seem to get this above 19 and a half bricks. And he was, 19 and a half? You were lucky to get it at
Wow.
19 and a half.
Wow.
That's just the nature of the Alicante. It does not get it above that.
Okay. Okay. You just didn't even know.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
I thought I could, just wait it out.
Yeah, right.
It'll get up
right.
to 22,
Yeah.
23.
Meanwhile, as you waited, the birds ate more.
Birds
and
ate them
more.
up. The rabbits came in here, the opossums, the raccoons.
Yeah. Yeah. And
We
they
even-
thought it was just right.
That's right. We even found a rattlesnake in here a couple of times
Wow.
too. So
Yeah. There you go. Look out.
there they go. So there we go.
Okay. So how long?
So I'm thinking another week.
Another week. So maybe next weekend.
Yeah, and we will do that which is almost sacrilegious to winemakers in California, in France. We're going to add sugar.
Whoa. Whoa. I didn't hear that, man.
No, because then we can bring the bricks up.
Oh,
but
okay.
but it's just and it's a certain amount of sugar.
an
We're not
enhancer,
we're
yeah.
not going to flip out and start
Yeah.
doing that. But then we'll get it to at least 21 with sugar, and that it just smooths out the taste
Okay.
in the end.
So you're going to have a bunch of volunteers come up here from your conservancy
Right.
because you have a actual winemaking conservancy.
That's right. There was
Yeah.
all of us, including you.
Yeah.
When the city suggested to the historical society that why don't you come and maintain the vineyard and do programs on wine history and make wine from it if you'd like
Yeah.
like to do that. So our first vintage was 2007, and the city at that point they hired an Armenian winemaker to help us with it because we didn't really know what we were doing. So
Yeah.
he was the winemaker, and sadly his English skills were, shall we say, less than stellar, and so we had a hard time communicating. And all of us in the in the Stone Barn Vineyard Conservancy, which is the group we started, we were really aghast when all of a sudden this winemaker took a huge box of Arm & Hammer baking soda and poured it into the wine. And we all went, what?
Wow.
Is this something that we don't really know about winemaking?
Yeah.
And he said, of course we need to, because it cuts down the acid.
Wow.
Well, it did cut down the acidity of the wine, but it made it taste like medicine.
Oh.
So that first vintage, which we had a nice label made up for it by the city, it's a great one to keep and put on your library shelf. That's the spot
and
for
never
it.
touch it
And
again.
never drink it again. So,
Wow. But
But we
this
did.
one's going to be good, man.
yeah,
This
should
one's
be.
going to be
It
good.
should be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because of the rains we had in February, March, it's going to be really good. We had a very mellow, cloud-covered spring.
We did.
So
June, July was.
Yeah.
it wasn't that hot. Last year, 2018. Remember that year? Remember in July, early
Yeah, we
July?
got some
It was
nasty-
115,
Yes,
118
yes.
degrees. Literally, the berries boiled on the vine.
Wow.
So we got like 2 gallons
Okay.
total.
Okay.
It
But
was
not this year. This
no.
year's going to be great.
if we can keep the critters away.
Are you going to camp out here with a shotgun? Or
I
something?
think about it a lot. You know, there is the Germans, being very clever people that they are, they came up with a noisemaker
All right.
to put in their vines to keep the birds away and animals too, because of the sound of German.
Oh,
It's very
yeah.
the name of the noisemaker is called Clappetitz.
We can't put that in.
Yes, you can. It is a definite
Yeah.
wound, and it's run off. There's a little windmill on
Yeah.
it, so the wind pick up the winds, and it has these wooden blades that clap together
Oh, okay.
like this,
Okay.
and it scares off the birds.
Okay.
Okay, guys, we're losing light. So
Okay,
let's
cool.
wrap it up and maybe just.
How about
All
right
right.
there?
Yeah, we could cut there. We could just say,
Well-
I'll see you at the next one.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
you know what we could do too is come back next week, next
cool.
weekend for the, the wine picking.
Yeah,
Let's
Wine
let's
picking and
see.
crushing.
I'm going to take another test on it probably Monday because it's a holiday.
Right.
So let's see
Yeah.
if it